So community empowerment is the theme of the panel, and you each in different ways have shown examples of what that might look like through creativity, through organizing, through indigenous knowledge, through skill building. I wonder, in your experience as fellows, in your experience in your master's programs, or just in your experiences in this United States culture, what is a memory or your own lived experience of community empowerment that you'd take away? Here, I'll give you this. I won't need to say anything. Okay.
Thank you, Erica. I'm actually, to respond to your question, I'm actually going to borrow something from Rory's presentation about food. So being a social worker means I'm also privileged to have both, engage in both theoretical experience, but also practical experience through the different practicums that we do during our 2 years here. So I have been doing my practicum at Refugee Community Partnership, which is based in Cabro. And one of the ways, because Refugee Community Partnerships works with so many different communities from different cultures, different contexts. And one of the things that I've seen that brings people together is food. Just like Rory said, people will either enjoy the food. For us, most part, we enjoy the food. And that becomes like a good basis for conversation, which is also very similar in my community. Anytime someone comes to your home, the first thing you'll do is give them food. So food has become a big part of some of the ways where I believe communities can continue to engage, but also has been a big part of my journey as a social worker as well.
I would have loved to have said food, but Debbie took it. So to think of something. No, actually, it's an easy one. When you asked the question, Erica, the first thing that came to mind was Rotary. I think we've all enjoyed, but also learned a lot from the way that you all gather and the way that you have your rituals. You meet once a week. You try and show up every week. Yeah, you're there. Whatever you're going through in life, you show up for each other. And I think that's amazing for us as Peace Fellows, because we've sort of copied some of that in the way that we do things. And we've been to your meetings, we've really enjoyed them, but taken from that the best thing about it, which is you all coming together across wide ranges of difference. I had the pleasure of going to a meeting over in Colorado, and it was just so nice to walk in the room knowing that it'll be such a welcoming, safe space to go to, and that meant a lot.
Thanks. Alongside Rotary and food. For me, my MIDP program itself, I felt very much in a community. The way how institutions work, they really put human at the center. So I really felt that all the education system and how the institutions operate, they put humans at the center. They really care for it. I can see my professor here, Natalia, and I can see some of the admin. Christine is there, like some of the people who really value and check on the people. So that's something that I really admire. Whenever I have a problem or like crisis, I go to admin, for example, and share. So those kind of human connection was something that maybe I was not able to put trust on in maybe back home. So something built on trust. This community is, I feel like, very much flourishing, not only for me, but for all the international students at Duke. I can talk about Duke for now.
Good answer, yeah. Well, for me, I mean, I think I shared that the aspect of voicelessness. And I feel like here my voice was heard. And I feel like I was able to feel safe in classrooms. And I want to say this to say thank you to Erica, Angela, and so many other professors. Like, they heard our voices and they made sure that we have a safe space to feel we're in a community. And that was empowerment for me. Like, my voice was being heard and respected in a lot of ways. So that was really a moment. I learned so much from being here. Rotary as well, like, honestly, everyone here at Rotary also, like, I presented them with so many challenges, and and there was, every time Jean and Susan were like, well, you're fine, we'll figure it out. And we did. So that also, the sense of community was a way to feel empowered. Yeah.
So what do we have as yes? What do you all want to know from these amazing people? Oh, great.
Hi. So I'm Laura Desher. I'm the program director for the Peace Centers. And something I'm always struck by is how achievable a lot of these solutions sound. And Debbie, you put the dollar figure to it that doing these community-based solutions are often much more cost-effective, sustainable, impactful than maybe some larger institutional reforms. So for all of you, what is that gap that's missing between why we continue to fund large-scale interventions over kind of smaller community solutions, and what message would you hope would get across as to why these interventions are so important and useful?
Big question. Yeah. I'll start. Yeah. Because I think you're gonna have better answers. So yeah, I think the way we look at projects and programs, initiatives, we build from the top up, from the top down. I think if we really consider like the bottom up approach, then that will have more like impactful projects and initiatives. I would never have thought possible that this generation in Gaza, for example, would need that initiative to kind of help them. Just because I'm from there, I know that I can fill that gap. So I think we just need to listen to the voices in those communities and really, really listen to them so we can fix the problems that they have.
To listen to the voices of the community, we need trust. We need to build trust, right? So it seems like the development that we have been doing since the end of World War, it's based on the expats' knowledge, which is definitely like useful in so many contexts, but might not in many contexts of the grassroots in the where marginalized people are the developing countries, right? So having this trust to the community is really like giving them the power to decide for themselves, bringing them in this co-creation journey of projects. So that I think that's very important to develop, co-design the projects together with experts and the community, which I think we are walking towards that path right now. But there is a long way to go. It takes a lot of courage and empathy to give the mic to the voiceless, because like we have been a voice of a voiceless for many years, but we have never tried to give a mic, pass the mic, just start up and give the mic.
Take the mic. Thank you.
Take it.
I love the question of funding. I think that's a big part of my research I've been doing with Erica. I think in every job and world I've been in, pilot funding has been some of the most useful funding out there. It's the one that has the lowest expectation, but sometimes the highest it's amount of trust that you give to somebody to implement their ideas and see how that goes and build on it later on. I think Rotary does that quite well, and I think there's always room for improvement with every funding organization. We, at the State Department, we would send people on exchanges for 3 weeks, emerging leaders, professional leaders from across civil service and NGOs and business. And some of the most impactful projects we saw were the ones that we only spent maybe $5,000. And we'd give a civil servant who was doing something in their free time the chance to convene people on climate change and bring people together on questions that maybe government institutions weren't working on. And that kept rolling and kept working. And it was this sort of trust that we gave one person with a small amount of money to try it out, see if it works, and learn from it and build.
I totally agree with everything they've all said, but I'm also going to talk about something that I was also trying to work on when I was back home. When you look at a lot of the indigenous knowledge practices, most of these are rarely passed on to the next generation, because some of these practices are very oral in terms of traditions. And so this is where now our role comes in, because we have not been documenting some of these practices. And so that means, even to Rory's point, like when funding comes, it means because we don't have anything documented, it's very rare for us to compete for these types of funding. And because it comes with a lot of restrictions, you have to reach this population, you have to do this, you have to, all the restrictions that come with different types of funding. So then I guess it also comes back to now, when it comes to thinking of co-creating with these indigenous populations, how do you co-create with them? So then now that funding can also be used to co-create some of these initiatives so that they're documented and people know about them. And then it becomes like a global movement where people are able to understand how they work.
We do have an online audience, and I know Christian is collecting questions. Do you have a couple, one or two to throw to the group here?
I do. Can you hear me? Yes. So we have questions from the audience, one specifically for Nish. How do you ensure that artivism doesn't become performative, only creating emotional impact without leading to real structural change?
That's a really good question. So that's why I think artivism, to not make it performative, we have to understand the two components of it. Artivism is not only about art. So most of the time when we talk about artivism, it feels like we're doing some kind of artwork, trying to push the masses, political masses through art. But actually it is also about strategy, the second component or the first component. So strategy is really about coming together, designing the solution together, understanding what kind of assets we have in the community, what kind of resources we can build upon. So that process of co-creation or like that process of planning will make it more impactful. It will rather not be a performative. It will become more impactful action.
Yes. So we have the next one. Go ahead.
Again. Thank you. You say my life. Hello, this is Andres, also from the MIDP program. Thank you, guys. It was amazing to listen to you. I have a question regarding structures and systems. So Rotary, companies, universities, all of them are organizations which tend to be very structured or hierarchical, and they tend to work on silos. Oh, I do this project for my club, for my district, for my university, and we are the ones doing this, right? But how can you invite us, or what can we do to break those silos and collaborate more with maybe with you, or maybe with other organizations? Thank you.
Take it away.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much, Andres, for the question. I think I personally believe that the institutions that we are trying to develop, the center, for example, is a path to break that silos. Rotary is working with Duke University and UNC University to break that silos, right? So I feel like we are on that path. It's like this kind of a co-creation, collaboration journey that we are trying to build is a pathway towards breaking the silos. Yeah.
Again. Do you want to? I'll take it. Yeah, I like the question. I spent 5 years in a huge bureaucracy that never ended, and I really enjoyed it. I think one of the reasons is that people are generally very surprised when inside bureaucracies there are humans that you can interact with, and in that you can shape a lot, you can influence a lot, you can build relationships that shape outcomes and what's possible. So I think we maybe have a tendency to see institutions and structures as impermeable and never changing, which feels true quite often. Like it definitely seems like that when you want some sort of change that's not been delivered yet. But I think tapping into the humans that are in those structures, probably the majority of them want some kind of change too. It's like working with that is what I really enjoy. The book that I recommended, The Art of Gathering, is kind of gets to that question of how to do that in community groups, but also how to do that in institutions that rarely work together or learn from the individuals on the ground. So it's worth reading on that point.
The other thing I would like to say is it's important to be intentional. And I guess this is where all our roles come in as Rotary Peace Fellows. I mean, if you read through the booklet, you'll see that each of us come from very diverse professional careers. fields. And so if, for instance, I find myself in a position where I'm leading an organization and I want to work with different communities, my first instinct will be, let me think about who are the stakeholders that need to be involved in this project. So obviously I'll think about Rotary. I mean, being a Rotary Peace Fellow, that's kind of automatic. Think about everybody else who would be able to contribute towards this project. So I think sometimes there's that, the willingness is there, but the lack of being intentional with that approach is what lacks. And so the moment we become intentional, then all of these stakeholders come together and you realize that you can reach more people by working together rather than working in isolation. Yeah.
Well, I don't have much to add, honestly. You said it very well, guys. But I think just intentional and reach out as a peace worker. I feel like in my work, we had sometimes so little budget to do a project and we just reach out to some sponsors. They were like, yeah, we will fund lunch, we will cover transportation, we'll do this and that. So I think the intentional reaching out to other stakeholders, you'd be surprised, bless you. You'd be surprised how many people would open their arms for you to help you bring peace or bring a project or a change somewhere.
We have that, yep.
Okay, and not a question, but a reflection on the last presentation, which was very impactful. Thank you for that. A favorite poet of mine is Seamus Heaney, an Irish poet who wrote quite a bit about hope as well. And he wrote about Northern Ireland and the troubles leading up to the 1998 Easter Accords. In his poem, The Cure at Troy, this is what he said: once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and history rhyme. And hope and history rhyme. I hope hope and history rhymes for you soon, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah, me too.
We have another online question. There's a man with a blue tie here who would like, do we have another online question?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Me? Yes. I apologize.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm so sorry causing so much confusion. First, Khaled, I guess I speak for everyone here. I hope your family is safe. I truly do. A tragedy, but I do hope they're safe. My question to the panel is, you talked about activism, the gotcha tree, the different arts. However, most organized activisms has some sort of outreach, whether it be Sinn Féin, the ANC, FARC, they had to create lasting peace. And in every one of those, there was a component of reconciliation, forgiveness. Sometimes that's extremely hard because it's an emotional concept. But ask you, how is that working, especially in Nepal and in Rwanda, that act of forgiving those atrocities, and is it working?
So it has already been 20 years of ending of civil war in Nepal, and we still feel like no, there hasn't been this TRC hasn't worked properly because those who were doing that atrocities are still in power, both from the Maoist side and from the military side. So yeah, that's something that I am working. And my team is working through building this collective power. A lot of marginalized people who were brought to protest for a violent protest who were recruited as soldiers. We are trying to work with their younger ones to teach them the peaceful way to still resist and do some collective action so that their voices are heard. They can put their voice in the table. So yeah, it's also a very challenging thing to do. Of course, institutions are not strong, and that's what I was telling earlier. The institution here is very strong, and that's why I think one of my goal is to also learn about how policy works, how institutions work, and maybe contribute back to building strong institutions in Nepal, which in return will create more justful society and bring justice to those who suffered from atrocities.
So I'll probably start with your last question where you asked whether it works. So in my context, yes, but also it has taken over 32 years for us to get to where we are at today. When I think about some of the strategies, at least as someone who worked directly with my own community, one is to be mindful of the context and the types of approaches that you use to bring people together to be able to begin this very difficult journey. So in Rwanda, one of the things I say is that we're very privileged because we speak the same local language. So that made it very easy for us to be relatable with the community. Unlike in some communities where there are different dialects, for us, we speak the same dialect or the same language. So this has made it very easier for us to bring people together. But also there had to be the willingness from the community themselves because you cannot impose some of these practices. And so our role was to show the communities how this can be impactful, at the same time allowing them to voice their concerns, because obviously it's not easy to bring together two very different individuals who have very different traumas, who are affected by the genocide against the Tutsi in so many different ways. And so it was a journey of continuous trial and error, sometimes trying things that were very unconventional, because one of the criticisms we get a lot was that our traditional justice mechanism was very unconventional. We didn't have judges who are like legal lawyers and things like that. But then at the same time, it was also very impactful for our community, for them to see people they could relate with and not someone who's come from a different context altogether. And so those are some of the strategies that I believe have really been very impactful. But also the other thing I must say is patience. When it comes to healing work and working with the communities, you cannot expect results overnight. It takes 2, 3 years, 5, 10 years, and the journey is still going on. We still have a lot of community members who are still undergoing trauma as a result of what happened to our country. So you have to be patient. Even as someone working with these communities, patience is crucial.
Christian, I'll try again for the online question.
Okay, so question for Debby. What gaps or challenges became evident after the Gacaca courts concluded their work?
Thank you. The biggest challenges we faced after the Gacaca courts was trauma. Because a lot of this happened within a span of 10 years. And so the biggest challenge now we had to deal with was trauma. And so this is where the government, but also civil society organizations, practitioners, everybody decided to chip in. So for the longest time after the genocide against the Tutsi, a lot of, I say this with the generation of my parents, most of them had to give their I would say their service in form of like a voluntary role, because as you know, infrastructure was destroyed. And so a lot had to be done to begin that reconciliation process. So trauma, but also when it came to, there was also a challenge with some of the perpetrators who were also, some individuals were wrongly accused. And so this is why documentation was also a very important part of the process. And so through that documentation, people were able to find out what exactly happened in what area, and so that everybody who was held accountable actually committed genocide crimes and not just holding people based on hearsay. The other thing I would say was a challenge for us, obviously, was infrastructure and resources, because a lot of the times these courts were held under places where obviously things like basic needs were also hard to get by because the government didn't have any. I know there was a lot of, that was the time actually where we started receiving funding to be able to fund the Gacaca courts. So yeah, there's a lot to say, but I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Then in the middle here we have, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Way back when you were mentioning the oral handing down of traditions, it made me think about technology and how much has changed in the last 15, 20, 25 years with the internet, but especially smartphones and the proliferation even in rural communities and developing countries, and the change in the cultures and youth who weren't, especially in Rwanda, they weren't a part of the genocide. They were born afterwards. And as incorporating indigenous traditions into political decisions and everything, I wondered if you could just address how technology is impacting the changes in in traditions, indigenous traditions, please.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, because Rwanda has become one of the places, I would say, in East Africa where internet connectivity is really high on the rise. We have so many spaces where internet is available. And so this has been one of the strategies we've been trying to do as part of rebuilding our country, to ensure that we use technology to the better advancement of what we want to achieve as a community. And so if you look at, as I mentioned in my presentation earlier, this being the 32nd commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, you'll see a lot of the media, there is those aspects of documentation. So because of that, we've been able to use technology to our advantage to not only bring these stories to light, but also to document some of the traditions that were really very impactful for our community. So because time would not allow, but there's one thing that we have been using that has been very indigenous in terms of like dealing with the issues our country has been facing, and we call them homegrown solutions. So these are documented strategies that we've been using, and these can be found online. So like I said, you can connect with me under a tree and I can talk more about them. But these have been really, we've been documenting this also along the lines of not only for our community, but for other people to be able to learn from these practices. Because I believe you can't take everything that you've seen in a particular context and implement it in another. But there are certain things that you can definitely borrow. So this is what we've been doing when it comes to, we have 70% of our population are young people. We are a very young country. And so because of that, that means we are leveraging a lot on the experiences of young people to be able to document these practices, but also with the challenge of having lost a huge elderly population, we're still trying to figure out how is the best way to make sure that whatever memories and tools that they left our community with are kept alive for future generations.
Okay, we are ready for a lunch break. So first, let's congratulate these fellows one more time. Yeah, you're getting a standing ovation. And then we do invite you to continue the conversation at lunch through on the first floor and the second floor. Enjoy. What time do we start again? 1:30.